Welcome to another video of Spanish Performance, and we're going to be talking about performance ratio that I like to use, that I've been using for the past few years in order to control our athletes' body weight and the way they're performing in a relative manner when we're talking about force production at moderate speeds, high speeds, and low speeds. The first thing that I have to mention is in terms of this ratio that I use is a relative ratio, which means that no athlete can be compared to another. We're going to get different ratios for every athlete. This is going to be one ratio to compare the same athlete during their journey, during their training, and to compare their different metrics, if they're losing, if they're gaining, or they're maintaining weight, and how that is affecting their performance in terms of force production. So the first thing that we need to do is we're gonna grab the general metric. General metric generally is gonna be body weight. We could be using body fat percentage. We could be using muscle mass, weight, kilograms, pounds, whatever we wanna use. But relatively easier way to do it is to just use body weight. That's what I've been doing because it's the easier metric to use, because it's easier to have, and because most of the time we don't have the technology to obtain the other ones are not going to be as accurate as just body weight that we can grab with the scale anywhere, anytime. The second metric that we will use will be any performance metric that indicates some kind of force production. There's three main ones that I've been using because they're the easiest ones to have, because we don't really need force plays to get these ones. They could be more or less accurate, but they're going to be consistent if we always use the same way of testing them. And I divide them depending on how fast that force is being produced. If we're talking about slow production of force, I'm gonna use peak force on IMTP, isometric mid-thigh pull is gonna be an isometric force test. And that I'm gonna be using the peak force for that metric. We could substitute this with how much you can lift on a given lift, on a squat, on an RDL, whatever you wanna use, but I will prefer to just use peak force if we have that metric. If we don't have that metric, I'll prefer just not to have it, because just general dynamic lifting efforts are not something that's just gonna give me the overall capacity of producing force for that athlete, just because we have so many things that we have to take into account. That could be body weight, that could be the length of the levers, the length of the athlete, and I just don't like to use metrics like general lifting. If we're talking about high speed production of force, I like to use RSI from a drop jump, or I like to use an RSI mod. RSI mod is going to be calculated with force plates, and RSI could be used with my jump from Carlos Balsalobre. It's a good app that we can just use anytime, anywhere. We can also use it with contact mats. And lastly, it's going to be force that is produced at relatively high speed, but it's going to be a medium between strength, so slower speed, and high speed metrics, which is going to be counter movement jump height or drop jump height. Drop jump height is going to be a little faster than a counter movement jump height, but again, you can use any metric for performance that you want to use. You can even use sprinting if you want to do it. In terms of sprinting, you will have to change the order that you create that ratio. And what I mean with that is that we're going to use this way of calculating it. So the performance ratio metric is going to be at the top, and at the bottom, we're going to have body weight. So let's say that we have an athlete that's jumping 35 inches and his body weight is 220 pounds. That's what we're gonna use the whole time. If we have any change on body weight, gonna go to 225, there's an increase in weight and there's a decrease in performance, then that ratio is clearly gonna go down. So that's pretty much how we're gonna calculate that ratio, and then we can go into how to interpret this ratio. In terms of how to interpret this ratio, I think this is where things get a little bit more complicated, just because there's not one way to just look at the graph and be like, this is what we want or this is what we don't want. In this graph, I'm just showing time and showing the ratio. And pretty much the blue is going to be a good progression of the ratio. In red, we're going to have a bad or something that we probably don't want. But if we have a clear increase of the ratio, we see, for example, in this case, that we have an athlete that's losing weight, but is also gaining in performance in an RSI mod, in drop jump height. Any of those performance metrics, which will probably have, it will happen with athletes that are have been trained, they have training experience, and they're in a good condition. then we're gonna have that clear increase, and we probably want that ratio to go up. If we see a great decrease, which will probably be the case that we were throwing right here, which is an increase in body weight, a great increase in body weight, and a great decrease in performance, then we're gonna see a great decrease on this ratio. Now, we need to consider many scenarios, because it's not only gonna be one thing. Yes, if we see a great increase, then it's probably something that we want. If we see a great decrease clearly in the graph, then it's probably something that we also don't want. But if we start seeing, which is probably going to be in many cases, if we start seeing changes that are not as drastic as the one that I drawn on blue and red, then we're going to have to jump into the scenario. We're going to have to look at the body weight. We're going to have to clearly see what is the trend for the body weight, and we're going to have to clearly see what is the trend of that performance metric. So I put a few examples right here of the main ones that if we're either gaining or losing weight, this is usually useful just for athletes to look at if they want to just track themselves, or just for coaches to control their athletes. I marked the two main ones that we kind of are expected to see many cases, which will probably be if we're trying to gain weight with that athlete. In many cases, we probably are going to see in many athletes that have already been training for a few years, is that we increase the body weight and then we see a decrease in performance. We're going to see a clear decrease, and that's probably not going to be something we want. If the decrease, so if we see that increase of body weight and a moderation of performance, so we see that there's not many changes in performance, then it might be something we want, it might be something we don't. A moderate or a maintenance in performance with a moderate increase in body weight, that might be something that a lot of athletes, contact athletes, need and want, and that's going to be okay. But we need to know the context of that athlete. The coach is going to know that. The athlete is going to know that. Me in general, I got no idea who your athlete is. I know who mine athlete are. So again, we can see another scenario, which is an increase in body weight, an increase in performance, and we're going to see a maintenance on that ratio. Again, we're not going to see a clear rate of increase or decrease. We can see both, but we're going to have clear that if we are actually trying to increase that body weight of that athlete to increase performance, then that is something that is actually helping. If we go into the losing body weight sector, the main clear thing that we might see many times is for those athletes that have been training for a while, that have an excess of body fat, is that if we decrease body fat percentage, if we decrease body weight in general, we're doing it in the correct way, we're going to see an increase in performance. That is the fastest way to increase performance many times. This is not something that's talked about, but if an athlete is carrying extra weight, the best way to increase performance in producing force is to decrease that body weight. So we're probably going to see a clear ratio that's growing, and is growing clearly, and that is something we want in that case of that athlete. We also need to consider that many athletes might be losing weight drastically. They might increase performance for a little bit, and then it drops because that body weight is not good for them. We need to take that into account. We need to always have a holistic view of this process. If we see a decrease in body weight and we also see a decrease in performance, again, we're going to see maintenance, and we might not be alarmed, but we should be alarmed if the athlete is dropping body weight, because in this case, we do not want to see any kind of drop. We don't want to see a drop in body weight and a drop in performance, because that is probably not helping the athlete. We're dropping weight too fast. That athlete doesn't need to drop weight. That athlete is dropping muscle. We need to consider that. We don't really want to see that scenario. And then we can have this scenario where the athlete is dropping weight and is maintaining weight, maintaining performance. And in that case, it will probably be a good thing if that's what we need to do with that athlete. If it's an athlete that it's already have low body fat percentage, is losing weight, but is maintaining performance, it probably is not hurting him that much, or her. But it's something we should consider. If that athlete doesn't really need to lose weight, then we should not be doing that. We'll probably find a different strategy that is going to help her or him increase that performance. So again, we need to consider all these scenarios. This ratio is created to have a clear image. Us as coaches and athletes even, you're going to know what you're doing with your body weight. You are going to clearly know if you're increasing body weight or if you're decreasing body weight. So once you know that as a person, as an athlete, as a coach, you're going to be able to go to this ratio and be like, okay, I'm losing weight. I know I'm losing weight, but my ratio is going clearly up, or I have a moderate trend up. Then I know that that drop of body weight is actually being good for me in terms of performance. If I'm gaining weight and I see a moderate increase or even at maintenance, I know that that body weight increase is probably not hurting me or even is helping me. If I increase body weight and I see a clear drop, then I probably know that that body weight increase is not helping me. So there's a million ways to interpret this. I think it's most useful for yourself, for your own athletes, once you know what they're doing, once you know them well, because you're gonna be able to track these changes in body weight, changes in performance, and gonna be able to see if those changes in body weight are helpful for their performance and also healthy. So once again, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for being here.